Oh, it's straight to live, my mate.
Straight to live. What's up, brother?
How are you, mate? You good?
I'm doing all right. I have a coffee brewing.
Yeah, I've just got some water now.
I'll have to step over and grab that if you don't mind. But it's done. It's almost done.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Well,
So
thank you.
did you figure out how to do the TikTok?
It's gonna be a different perspective. I don't know how to like link the. I don't know how to do all that shit, dude. I'm not the biggest on technology, I guess. So
No,
so
no, mate.
we'll figure it
I
out.
was uh, I was thinking before, one of the biggest things that I wanted to get from you today was a smile, because I've noticed when you're on the old TikTok lives, it can get pretty irate, should we say?
It does get a little. It gets a little heated, but that's kind of the point, right? Is to kind of
Yeah.
bring up those sensitive subjects and talk about them and see what people think.
Well, that was something that I was gonna. First of all, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. That was sort of the topic that I was going to speak on a little bit later on, was my understanding as to why you're doing what you're doing. And I think I know why you're doing what you're doing, but we'll speak a bit later on and we'll figure it out. Um, First of all, mate, we'll start early years with you. And I had a read through your bio before on your website, and I got a couple of questions and things like that from your history and stuff. So, yeah, man, if you just want to start from the beginning, and we'll go from there, sort of explain a little bit about your past, and the things that you've been through, and what's sort of made you become the guy you are today, I guess.
All right. So it's important to point out, I think, that I'm in recovery now. So like I'm clean and sober, going on 6 years in January, if everything works out.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so for me, I sought to relieve myself of the pressures from abandonment and a toxic sort of household that I grew up in.
Yeah.
The relief was just something that I chased. No matter what, no matter what body I had to step over or whatever. So even at a young age, acting out, whatever, they considered it behavioral disorder kind of thing at a younger age, and was immediately put into institutions. At 13, I was committed to the state, and so I was institutionalized at a really young age, and kind of in and out of all that from 13 to 33. So my family was a dynamic in such that like you were allowed to drink and drug so long as you went to work all week, and
Okay. Yeah.
as long as you were working, you could party. It didn't matter. And so that was kind of the atmosphere I grew up in, kind of roughneck construction, white collar, blue
Same.
collar. We started as like a white collar family when I was younger. We had a pretty successful construction company. My grandfather had a bunch of crews, but it kind of started to disintegrate and fall apart. And then my father, left to his own devices, did what he could to be a father, which he didn't really know. So
Yeah.
he was just a young lad with a couple of kids. So it's tumultuous. We moved around a lot. We, every time we got settled down, we would move again.
Yeah.
And every time I would make friends or whatever, it's like I was brought to another place and had to start over again. So from the beginning, acting out, behavioral disorder, whatever, kind of like the center of attention in school, very popular, kind of like the class clown, but also like the football star, kind of the athlete, but was also like had a criminal record, and
Yeah.
I was a womanizer and using drugs and stuff like that. So I've always kind of been in like the public eye. Like I can't hide in a
Yeah.
crowd, even today.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that led to, we have a saying in recovery that the disease is progressive. And so for me, it got progressively worse, like pretty fast. One thing led to another, start doing more stuff. And before I knew it, I was homeless, heartless, helpless, and hopeless, trudging the streets with nowhere to live. Not because the people who loved me didn't love me, but because I was a liability to be around, if that makes any
Yeah. I
sense.
get it. Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
And so
Yeah.
that led to some pretty desperate living situations with some pretty unsavory people, to say the least. And so I
Did you
got
find
myself. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Did you find that being around those unsavory people sort of filled in the cracks of not having certain individuals around you, like your family and stuff like that, when you were a lot younger? You know, because the sort of the wolf pack mentalities, you know, it sort of replaces that gap that we sort of thrive for when we're a kid with family and stuff. At least that's the way that I saw it. I had similar experiences to yourself with family and things like that. And what I found was the wolf pack sort of becomes your family, if you like.
Yep. Yeah. So you nailed it. You know, looking for validation, I think, is the right way of communicating it. Right. So I didn't have that really from my family. So I would outsource validation through, criminal misbehavior and trying to kind of climb the rungs of the criminal underworld in a sense by being the most willful, like willing to act, willing to do crazy shit. And I was gang affiliated at 13 and started hanging out with those people, trying to make a name for myself on the street. And so that continued all the way up until my last bid. So I just finally, I got, okay. So it's important to point out, so heartless, homeless, helpless, hopeless, right? Trudging through the streets, had nowhere to go. And I ran into a woman that knew my family, and she was in her late 40s, early 50s. I was in my late 20s, and she offered me a place to stay. And, so I looked at her and, without having to work or pay bills or do anything. And it's like, I love you, like those, it's like, where have you been all my life? Like this is a romance made in heaven. And when I talk about that in like recovery circles, people always get a rise. They laugh to that. And that's how you know you're in the right place, when people can identify with that. It's like, she provided me the space and enabled me to act the way that I wanted to act, which was entirely self-centered. And, I didn't have to work or pay bills or contribute in any way. All I had to do was just be there. So it's like, where have you been?
And I get it's so easy then to just fucking destroy your whole life completely, isn't it? I mean, you've got nobody to answer to, and you don't have to give out excuses or lie. You can just, annihilate everything that you want to, I guess.
And that's exactly what happened, right? Because she provided the means for me to get what I wanted, and that got ugly pretty fast. So whatever addiction and habit that I had at that point only progressed like real fast and really hard. So this went on for like 4 or 5 years. And one morning when I was sick and suffering, kind of tossing and turning like a fish out of water, waiting for her to wake up to give me the resources I needed to go get what I wanted to feel better, because it was all about me. Came down the stairs. I'm like, the hell is your problem? Like, don't you realize how sick I am? And she's just got to get ready to go to work. And so she looked at me like, I was like, you got to give me some money. She's like, well, I don't have any money. I was like, well, then you got to go to the ATM machine. And she's like, no. I'm like, well, what do you mean no? Like, I've never heard that word in the 5 years we were together. So when she said no, it was like, well, if you don't give me something, I'm going to go do something stupid. And she was like, well, go ahead. And so I did. It's kind of like, I'll show you kind of thing. Like, it was like an empty threat, but she called my bluff. And so I went down to the neighborhood convenience store. You guys, I mean, I'm sure like you have that store that you go to 5 times a day where everybody knows you.
Yeah.
So I went down to that convenience store and I tied a bandana over my face. And this is pre-COVID, I should mention. And I walked in, and my lawyer says to me the next day, John, in my 30 years of practicing law, I've never seen a masked armed robbery where the assailant waited in line. He's like, did you know you waited in line? I'm like, no, dude. He's like, it was a very polite robbery. I've never seen anything like it. And he's like, you waited till it was your turn to do what you had to do. And so the crazy thing is when it was my turn, the woman looked right at me and she said, John Wayne, take the mask off. Like, she knew exactly who it was, like, okay, so this is another point I like to make. Listen, I have a long criminal record, but it's not because I'm a mastermind. It's not because I have some sort of criminal intent. It was always because I was finding ways and means to seek the relief that I needed or found in drugs and alcohol. And so,
it's acts of desperation, isn't it?
An act of desperation is exactly what it was. And so when it was my turn, she looked at me and said, take the mask off, which is kind of a metaphor, right? And like looking back, it's like, I had to take off that persona of John Wayne, the guy on the street that I was trying to embody. And she told me flat out to like take the mask off, and she gave me a chance. But I insisted in a not so polite way that she opened the register. And she looked at me with this pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Like she felt bad. You know, she was like, dude, like do whatever you got to do. And so I took what I needed, and I went and I got what I needed. And I don't know if you've had similar experience, but when you're in that state of desperation, it's a miracle how we find a way to get exactly what we want. Right. And so even though I had nothing and I had gone to that level of desperation, I still found a way to get exactly what I needed that day. And unfortunately, the DA says to my lawyer, John recently applied for a job at the location. So we had all of his information on file.
Man, you're definitely not a mastermind then, definitely not.
So they just came down and knocked on the door, and then they took me into custody. Now, this was normal, right? So I'd been in and out of institutions my whole life. So it's like going to jail was like a regular thing for me. And getting there, what changed is that the charges were very, very serious. And so they put me on a high profile unit. On that high profile unit, there was a bunch of guys just like me who made a bunch of really bad decisions, just like I did. And they had unalived people or multiple people. Right. And they weren't bad people. Like they did really bad things, but just like I'm talking to you, they were normal presenting people. And that kind of shook me to the core because it made me realize the capacity for violence that we all have and how lucky I was to not be looking at a life sentence. All the guys that I had breakfast with every morning were never going to see the streets again. And so that kind of woke me up. It made me realize that there was something I had to do about this.
And that was going to be one of my next questions was, you know, for somebody who spent most of their adult life and, you know, teenage life, I guess, in and out of jail, was that your turning point then to sort of say, you know, I've had enough, something needs to change?
It was the turning point because I finally identified the problem. For me, it was always everybody else. It was everybody else. It was the cops. It was the judges. It was my parents. It was the teachers. It was everybody except for me. I was speaking victimese and I was armed with a flamethrower. You know what I mean? I would scorch anybody that was near me. And to finally have these people looking at me like, you have some hope. Like there's a chance that you might get out and turn your life around. Like you should take advantage of that. And so I started to do the right thing right then and there. And it's a big debate in jail, right? Like, cause people are always like, oh, wait till you get out. You're going to have the real challenge when you get out. But I started to try to do the right thing there. And that put me on the right path. I got into a drug program and I started to do the right thing and participated in a songwriting program that I later wound up working for, you know? So it's amazing how much life can change when you start to make changes. It sounds so cliche.
No, I agree. Initially, before we had this conversation, I thought that me and you had had similar lives, but now that I'm speaking to you, you've had a very similar life to my brother. My brother's lived a very, very similar life. But for me, you know, I'll just give you a brief of my life, I guess. I've told this story many times, but I had some difficult things happen to me as a child. Grew up with sort of this victim entitlement that people should do everything for me, and you know, I deserve people to treat me in a certain way because of the way I'd been treated in the past. Didn't turn out that way, and I became quite a I want to say the word spiteful individual. Like if people were doing well in life, I'd be jealous, and you know, if people didn't like me, I'd want to know why, and because, you know, I thought everybody should like me, and I've just played this victim, you know, from what you've just said, it was the same as that, and I got into drugs and sort of breezed through my whole 20s living that type of lifestyle. As, you know, I had 2 children, and even though I thought I was a good father, which I still think I was, I could have been a lot better. I just had this sense of entitlement that the world owes me a fucking favour, and unfortunately it doesn't. And it's only the last couple of years where I've realised, you know, if I don't change, then nothing's going to change. Everything will stay the same. And it's only when I realised that a couple of years ago is when this growth mentality has come out in me. And I'm really not saying I'm nowhere near where I need to be, but who is? What I've made some big changes in my life, and I'm really, really, really trying to do the right thing. That doesn't always happen. Even now, it doesn't always happen. But I'm trying to be a better version, day on day, week on week, and that's brought me to where I am now, to want to have conversations with people like you and other men that have been in difficult places in their lives. And you're a perfect example. Look at what you've been through, and look at where you are, and look at what you're doing. So yeah, that's me.
So I'm kind of curious of your opinion on the origin of like that self-centeredness, like, right? Because I don't know about you, but like one of my earliest memories is like when my father would send me out to the car to grab something, and I would go down to the car and I would get whatever it was. And like the second I shut the door, I had this feeling like there was something behind me sort of chasing me. Like it felt like I'm just I'm a little guy like at this point, like, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And it felt like there was like a monster chasing me, right? And so I would run as fast as my little feet could carry me back to the safety of the adults. And then when I got there, I would burst through the door with my little heart pounding in my chest, scared to death. But my father was hanging around a bunch of guys that were all hanging around people who were drinking and deeply misogynist. And so when a little kid bursts through the door like that and he's terrified, they made fun of me. So it's like, and then so I buffed my chest up like, oh no, I'm not scared. And so denying. And like, even like when I went to go to bed, like I would shut the light off and like dive into my bed because I was scared something was going to get me. So I think the reason that was happening is because, and maybe a lot of other men who are listening to this can identify with this, right? The atmosphere that I lived in was deeply unstable. So when you're a kid, you don't understand anxiety, you don't understand fear, you don't understand abuse and neglect and like all of those things. So it kind of manifests itself in the form of like a monster, right? And so for me, that thing chased me until I found alcohol. Like alcohol and substances were like the thing that brought me a part of the group. And so I belonged to something. And then from there, the self-centered and like the fire was lit. You know what I mean? And there was nothing I could do to quench that fire except for shovel more shit into it. And so I didn't really care about anybody else. All I cared about was my reputation. All I cared about was finding ways and means to get more. And I would do whatever it took to do either of those things, whether it was stepping over other people or, so is that something that is familiar to you?
Well, so where I live, I live in Wales. So when I was a kid, it's funny you should say that we don't understand fear, because this is going to sound quite a nasty thing to say, but fear was a normal thing for me when I was young.
Right.
So I probably didn't understand it. I thought it was a sense of normality, I guess. But I lived, so my bedroom window, you looked out of my bedroom window, and there was a castle, probably 50, 100 meters away. Big old medieval castle. And I used to look into the dungeon window of the castle, and I'd always think that there was something in there waiting to come and get me. So maybe not the same as you, but very similar.
It is very similar, yeah, because
Yeah,
the presence that I felt was coming from like the woods, right? And the dungeon kind of represents the same thing. It's like that space of unknown, and the fear of unknown. And as a child, I don't know if it's normal to have those feelings. Like, I don't know.
I think it is. You hear a lot of children say, you switch the light off and you run and jump into bed and the monster's under the bed and things like that. So maybe that could be a natural thing as a child, I guess. But, at the same time, there was probably a lot of children experiencing the same things that we were,
So there's something to that, right? Because I would assume, and I wouldn't know because I didn't experience it, but I would assume in a nurturing household, if you were having that sort of fear where, the monster was under the bed or whatever, that you would have the type of parent who would nurture that and comfort you. Yeah. But in my household, that wasn't a thing. So I had to learn how to nurture and comfort myself. And that is what led to some really impulsive and hedonistic lifestyles, right? Sexual stuff, alcohol and impulsive, quick release sort of avenues of relief, right?
Do you feel as though you never got a chance to grow up?
I feel like I had to grow up way sooner than I was supposed to. Like, I don't even know, at 8, 9, 10 years old, I was already trying to smoke cigarettes. Like, you
Same.
know what I mean? I was already trying to imitate what the adults were doing. And in my household, the adults were doing, drugs and alcohol and partying, and they were talking openly about sex and all that stuff was there. So trying to reenact what they were doing.
Oh, so when I say, do you feel as though you didn't get a chance to grow up? So that there in sort of answers my question as to yes, as to no, because what I mean by that is, that there, what you've just explained, that's not really growing up as such. It's not really becoming a man that you'd wish to be. That's becoming a man that you have sort of formed into
Right.
naturally through your surroundings. For me, I'm 37 now.
Me too.
And I fit
What year were you born?
August 87.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, August 87.
That was April.
So for me, I don't think I grew up until probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I always lived the sort of impulsive lifestyle where I just do what I want when I want. Don't get me wrong, I had the things that I needed to look after in life, but it takes a long time for men to grow up, I think.
Well, we know for sure that men mature later than women do. We know
Right.
that for sure, right? So there's that element. But then when you have the neglect and the abandonment and the abuse and all that stuff kind of weighing in on the same scenario, it's like, what other outlet would you seek other than like hedonistic criminal behavior that's impulsive?
That's a fair point.
That's also aggressive too, right? I was always aggressive, and not towards like, it was never. Even at a young age, I would aim my aggression at people who were also aggressive, if that makes any sense. Like, I was always the kind of guy that was trying to bully the bullies. Like,
Okay.
I didn't allow that shit in my space. So there was always kind of a moral compass, even though it was buried. And like, I would do a lot of self-centered kind of destroying, self-defeating things. Self-destructing is the right way of saying it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so from
What
there,
were the... Sorry, go on.
from there, it's like I got into this program and things were different there. I had a guy come into the jail who was a former gang member of a really respectful street gang in my area, and he was one of the originals, and he had totally turned his life around. He got his mental health counseling license, and he started a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
And he's doing pretty big things for the community. And he came in to speak, and he was talking about how we had to give up that persona, right? Take the mask off. So the same thing is kind of reverberating through my conscience, and like I'm deeply contemplating letting go of this part of who I am, but I'm so used to that character that it was painful to let it go. But when he gave his presentation, it made me realize that that I could do it. Here's a living example right in front of me, a person who'd done state time, who turned his life around and let go of the gang life and built a life for him. With nobody from his set ever came at him or anything like that. They all supported him, and that was always like a fear of mine too. Like, what are the brothers gonna think? And so I went back and I told them that I'm done. I had made a decision, and throughout that recovery, people were saying like, dude, you can't be John Wayne, the recovery advocate, and John Wayne, the gangbanger. Like, you got to make a decision, bro. And so when I made that decision, there was a little pushback at first, like some of the guys were like, what the fuck kind of deal. But in the end, they supported it. One of them called me out one time over a cup of coffee. This was like a week before graduation ceremony for the music program. And I had incentive, right? I wanted to be a part of this music program. I love music. And so when he called me out, I tried to contain the disagreement and bring it to the cell so it wasn't in front of everybody. And I was trying to talk him down, and he threatened me more than once to get out or he was going to hit me. And I told him, like, listen, you do what you got to do. He was a big dude. He was twice my size, and he hit me not once but twice. And historically, my whole life, I didn't need a reason to fight people. Like, I was looking for a reason to try to work my way up the hierarchy or whatever. And the fact that this kid hit me not once but twice, and I just looked at him, I'm like, and I walked away. And you always hear that cliche statement, the bigger man walks away. But I'll tell you what, I walked away from that kid. 2 days later, he apologized. Like, he went out of his way to say, listen, man, my bad. That was way out of line. And so that showed me power. You know, that like, I don't have to take the bait. I can 100% walk away, even if they hit me. I mean, he hit me twice. And I walked away. And what I gained from that was the life that I have today. Because if I had swung back or taken the bait, we both would have got lugged. I would have been pulled out of the recovery program. I never would have been able to graduate, which we ended up making headlines and all kinds of shit for the graduation ceremony. And
was that the reason? Was that the reason why you walked away? Is because you knew that if you did retaliate, you were throwing away something that could possibly be good for you?
It was the first time I had something in the future to look forward to that was tangible. It was the first time I had motive or incentive to walk away. Because the only motive and incentive I had historically was to gain self-centered interest. It was always, the only motive was always about me. And this was about my future in a way, but it was also because I wanted to be a part of the group. I felt as though if I had left or if I had crashed out, that they would have lost a primary element of the songwriting experience that we created, you know? So I wanted to be a part of that instead. And so walking was the best thing I ever did. That guy still reaches out to me on a regular basis to commend me on the fact that I put my foot down and I followed through. Right? It's one thing to talk a big game, but it's another thing to follow through with it. And so when I got out, it was COVID. Like, COVID happened right before I got released. This is another pretty important part. There was a woman that I always loved growing up. She was beautiful and she wanted, you know, a relationship, but I always felt she deserved better because I was a scumbag, you know? And I'm like, you know, when I get my shit together, you and I will be together forever, right? That was like the promise. And that's what I always put it off. When I started getting into heavy drugs, she totally disconnected from me. Fair enough. When I went to jail, I had heard on the street that she was struggling with cancer. And she had the cancer in remission. She was a tough chick, a full-blooded Italian. You know, she was a fighter. But when COVID broke, her immune system was compromised. Well, actually, it was right before COVID broke. So in February of 2020, I got the news that Sabrina had passed away. And my whole goal, part of my goal was to get out and like love this woman back to health. Like that was my goal. And to lose her was like a bomb in my, I never lost anybody death has always been pretty good to me. Like I never lost somebody that I was intimate with. And so that was a feeling that I'll never forget. But she also showed me something pretty beautiful about death, and that it doesn't have to be like a bad thing. It could be a very powerful experience if we let it. And so that hurt. And it was so like 2 days later, I got my parole paperwork. So I was this close to the goal of getting out and being with that person. So they released me on parole, and they handed me a mask, which I thought was kind of funny. Like
I was just thinking then there's a bit of irony in that. I suppose you're being released, the first thing they give you is a mask. What are you going to do? Go and rob another fucking shop?
Right. So they hand me a mask, and I'm thinking like, this guy's got jokes. Like if there's a God, he's funny. Like that guy's got jokes. And like, I didn't know if I'd go in the store or anything with a mask on. Like this doesn't seem like, you know, like I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
But and this is I guess an important part of my story, right? Because when I got to the sober house, I had nothing. I had no money, no car, no clothes, no support, no family really. I had the clothes on my back that the pastor gave me, the cell phone that the pastor gave me. I was, honest to God, sitting on the front porch, scrolling Facebook dating, looking for my future wife. Because in my mind, I was ready to start a family and buy the house and get the white picket fence, but I had nothing going for me. So my whole life I've been like, if you're looking at life like a mathematical equation, I always wanted what was to the right of the equal sign. I wanted the solution. I didn't ever want to look at the problem, right? Yeah. So I'm scrolling Facebook dating, looking for my future wife. And at that moment, this guy walks past me and he nodded at me and I nodded back. And he's like, hey, you know, they're having meetings over there 3 times a day, right? And I was like, they are? And he's like, yeah, because everything was shut down because of COVID. He's like, yeah, you should go. I was like, I should go. Bro, I was offended, you know, like, who the hell is this guy? Like, why would he say that to me? And like, it never occurred to me that, dude, you're sitting on the front steps of a sober house. So maybe somebody's going to offer you to go to a meeting. And so I went, and that was the beginning of like how everything changed for me.
I've got a quote on my phone. Been there probably best part of 4 years now. And it's something, it's not a quote, it's something that I just wrote. And it says, did you ever occur to yourself that you could be the problem?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Never occurred to me. It was everybody else. It was everybody else. And, you know, bro, that's exactly it. It never occurred to me. I was so unconscious of all the harm that I was creating on a regular basis. The self-destruction, it was all entirely unconscious. Like, I was on a mission to just remove myself in any way possible because I hated who I was. I hated how the things, it was because it didn't align with who I am as a person, but I was doing things like basically against my own will, like to try to build up this fake persona, to wear up this mask, like to score the points, right? So when I went to that meeting, finally, I waited a couple weeks so I could twist around in my own thinking to make it my idea. And I went down there and approached the door like, you know, like my name's John Wayne, and I have all the answers to how to stay sober because I'm 15 months clean and sober. I know how to do it. You might as well listen to me. And the old timers, you know, were irritated by that. This kid's jumping the gun. He's cut before the horse kind of deal. And one of them approached me and he told me I was full of shit. And, you know, I had just gotten out of jail. Like, I had just come off the streets. When that guy said that to me, I wanted to hit him. Like, you know, I bit my tongue, and then I thought of all the ways I was going to tell him off. And before I did anything, thank God I didn't react. Like, right, I decided to take his advice. And that guy is my sponsor today. Still, he owns the property that I rent from. He gave me a job when nobody else would hire me because I have a terrible record. You know, and you know, one day at a time or whatever, like working minimum wage, I was able to get my license back. It took me 3 years, $17,000 in fines and fees, because I had a lien on my license for fleeing the scene of a DUI accident. You know, an outstanding civil suit that I never saw through. So that was about 12,000, and the rest of it was fines and fees. Every time the registry gave me something to take care of, like another thing popped up. It was like fighting the Hydra. You know, but a little at a time, I was able to do it. And I got my license back, which was a miracle. And then I bought a car. And then the sheriff from the jail the sheriff from Worcester County reached out and asked me to speak at his campaign kickoff party.
Wow.
And I delivered.
How did that make you feel as somebody who's been such a self-destructive individual, I guess, especially somebody from law enforcement?
Somebody from law enforcement. Well, to tell you, okay, really good question. I hated cops my whole life because it was their fault. It was their, on this bid, I learned how to realize that they were just people, like that they were just people, and that I was pissing them off in a lot of ways, and that if I treated them like people, they might treat me like a person. And so I was able to develop a different attitude towards police. When he asked me to come to the event, I was okay with the idea of speaking. It's like, absolutely, I have no problem speaking. And then like a couple weeks went by, and right before the event, he called me and said, John, I was wondering if you'd be willing to provide the music. That was something. So this guy believed in me literally when nobody else did, right?
Yep.
He saw what we did at the jail, and he appreciated the music that we created and whatnot. It's one thing to speak, but for him to believe in my creative process like that and to hire me as a musician to perform. So when I hung up the phone with him, I lost it, bro. I threw a fit. I was terrified. I felt like it was like imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't deserve it. Like, you know, that I can't do it. There's no way that they'll be happy or whatever. Like, I had all of the things. I ended up going to this event, and it's funny because I'm sitting there playing the guitar. It's a political event. So there's a lot of political bigwigs. Charlie Baker, who was the governor of Massachusetts, was there, and like all these other big political figures. And I'm in the background kind of just providing the music. And there was so many, I mean, this place is crawling with cops, like cops, correctional officers, sheriffs, I mean, you name it. And so every once in a while they would look at me, and then they would look again. Like they kept doing like double takes. They're like, you know, that guy kind of looks familiar.
Yeah, what the fuck's he doing here, sort of thing.
But they didn't place it though.
Yeah.
So I just looked like a totally different person. Like, but there was a familiarity to me. Like they kind of recognized it, but they didn't know what to make of it. So after when the event started and the speakers started going up, and then when they called me up and they called me by name and I walked up to that podium, the feeling in the room was electric. Like I don't even know really else how else to describe it. That speech was a home run. And the thing is like on the way there, my sponsor is the one who brought me. And on the way there, I was asking him if he thought I should tell them the story of like the robbery. And his suggestion was no, you shouldn't. Like you gotta know your audience. And I'm like, but it's a part of my story though. And he's like, well, but they're all law officials and stuff, John. I was like, I understand that. I think I'm gonna tell it anyway. He's like, I don't think you should. And so I did anyway. And I'm really glad I did, because these people were dying laughing. I mean, the roaring bursts of laughter that came out of these people, the delivery was perfect. Just everything was a home run, man. And Charlie Baker pulled me in for a hug afterwards. He's like, I don't know what you do for a living, but if it isn't public speaking, you need to get into public speaking. And then the sheriff expedited me to go back into the jail and then work with the inmates. So I then started my career as a songwriting instructor at the jail, the same jail that housed me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, going back to that bit where you're speaking in front of all those the police officers, and the thing is, there's a reason that you're obviously up there speaking in the first place, I guess. So, the fact that you're telling, 100 police officers that you've been to jail, it's not exactly something that they're going to be shocked to hear by somebody, And like you said before, these guys are humans. They have feelings and understandings, and, they see more crime than most of us, especially, where you're from. So yeah, man, if that was me, I would 100%, I'd have done the same thing as you, for sure. So.
I just felt like, why deny who I am?
Exactly.
Why, so like I have to reconcile with it. It's not going to go away. Right. And so being authentic, which is something I say on TikTok all the time, like consistency, being authentic. It's something that I never knew how to do, because it was always this facade. It was always this ego. It was always this show kind of John Wayne, like I was always the tough guy. I was always trying to keep up this, which was a lot of work, because it wasn't exactly who I was, but it got me through the stuff that I went through. Like, I don't know that I would have survived if I didn't have that entire persona. Like, it was
probably not. I had something very similar, mate. I had a mask on for a very long time. Not literally like you, but, I wore a mask, as a lot of people do, especially as men. I'm the same. I'm covered in tattoos. I'm 6'6" and big, heavy guy. And you don't want to show people your emotions. But, like you were saying there, until we, look at ourselves and really understand why you're emotional and learn to accept it and use it for positive rather than to fucking destroy your world completely, that nothing positive comes until that point. You might have a couple of days where you think, I feel good today, I feel happy, but there's nothing good going on in our lives at all until that point, like you did, where the mask gets taken off. And like me, I say, hi, my name's Lee, and this is what I'm about. And again, this is one of the reasons why I've started doing what I'm doing here, is because we're always a criminal in somebody else's story, right? We're always a criminal in at least one person's story. But I felt as though I was the criminal in my own story for such a long time that I learned to believe it, and I hated myself. Hate myself. And this is where the toxic traits come out in men, when we have these low emotions and low feelings about ourselves. And so I speak to a therapist a lot. I see a therapist every few weeks. And over the last couple of years, I've done some really good things, even over my whole life. I had children at 19. I've got 2 children at 19 and 22. I raised them up, 2 beautiful kids, really good kids. I've had some success in my life where I've not been able to accept it because of the fact that I didn't accept myself, And my therapist said to me, she said, you really don't take credit well, dear. You don't take credit well at all. Which I can't. Even now, my missus, who's upstairs, she gives me any credit it's so difficult to accept. But now I'm learning to accept it, whereas for a long, long time I couldn't because that mask was up. Now that I've taken the mask off and I've learned to be vulnerable, now I'm starting to accept these emotions and these feelings and all these different things that are happening in my life. And yeah, it gives me a little bit of a chill talking about that, you know?
Yeah, well, facts. So I had a bit of imposter syndrome, I would say, when I first having a clearance badge to go back into the same jail that I went through the same hallways, cuffed and dragged and, you know, throwing a fit and fighting people. The fact that I was able to walk through those corridors again from a different perspective was mind warping, to say the least. Like it to process. The guys in the jail immediately resonated with me. They immediately listened to me. I was able to communicate, connect with them right away. And it was something that I was deeply passionate about. And that was very rewarding in itself. The thing that really, you were going on about, I just lost my train of thought. You're talking about the self-hatred kind of thing. Right. Taking, compliment, like taking compliment and receiving success. Working for Opportunity was interesting because they have a very big political presence. They got to work with, or I should say, I got to work with a couple of like world-renowned classical musicians. So
Yeah, I read that.
For Opportunity was like to bridge the gap between the marginalized and dispossessed and like the upper echelons of music education, right? Because music education is something that's very expensive. It's not offered usually to people who come from marginalized communities or people that are in and out of jails and institutions their whole life. And so their goal is to do that. We connected with a fellow named Vijay Gupta, who's a personal friend of mine at this point, who runs the same mission down in LA, right on Skid Row. So it's a nonprofit called Street Symphony. VJ was very intense. He was a child prodigy. Like he went to Juilliard. He toured the world, playing the violin, even at a young age. Like if you Wikipedia his name, it's long. Like there's a lot of information and accomplishments that he's done TED Talks. He's spoken to like real big corporations and like all kinds of shit, this guy. So I get to share the stage with him. That's my profile picture on TikTok. There's a picture of me reading some of my poetry.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
with VJ on stage. This is another example of somebody who is ultra professional, right? Like Sheriff Lou, ultra professional, who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, who gave me the invitation to participate. They didn't know what they were going to get, but when they got the poetry and stuff that I had in me, they were like, "Dude, what?"
I've got some poetry for you later on, but I'll read it later.
I would love to hear. Yeah, this was okay. I'm a criminal. I have a long criminal history. The very first show that we did was a bit that he called Mirror and Lens. And he played a couple of pieces at the new Pryor Performing Arts Center at the College of Holy Cross. This is a multi-million-dollar facility, right? When he showed up with me, the president of the board was like, not him.
What's going on?
You can do what you need to do, but we don't know how we feel. Like this is a stage preserved for, in our idea, educated elite in theater, performance, and music. That guy is on parole. They're like, I don't know if we should do this. She was skeptical. DJ looked at that woman and he said, if he doesn't go on stage, I don't go on stage.
What was her reaction after you'd been on stage?
So obviously they let us on stage, right? We had to make some last minute adjustments. Literally like 30 seconds before we went live, we get on, we had to make some adjustments and I get on, we do our thing. The atmosphere was once again electric. The after party where we had like a debriefing kind of thing where, no, not a debrief. It's like a, not a meet and greet, but like, it's like when there was food and like, you know.
Yeah, like a little bit of a after party type thing.
Like an after party, like right in the main part of the, anyway. So we're out there and we're
Just not the after party that you're used to.
Yeah, right. No, not with things like educated elites and like these people, right? Nothing totally imposter syndrome, right? Trying to put on a different kind of mask, right? But it's not even really a mask. It's more of authentically who I am. Anyway, the president, this lady who was skeptical, she approached me gushing, like, thank you so much for being here. Like, what a humbling experience. It was so incredible to hear you. Like, our constituents are very pleased. And this set the precedent for the remainder of VJ's residency. So I wound up doing 3 more presentations with he and a couple of other elite musical people through an organization called Music Worcester. And it kind of helped me explode onto the scene as far as like who I am. It's like, starting to become kind of a public figure. The reason I brought all of that up is because the willingness for people up here to reach their hand down here and say,
yeah,
you can do this. Like, we're going to give you a shot, right? Because they didn't have to do that. Where did that come from? Right. Because my whole life I was begging for a break. I couldn't catch a break at all. I was in and out of jail. I was in and out of the gutter. Like I was so to the bone on days like this when it was wet and rainy and cold and just trudging the streets with everything I owned in my backpack. Totally comfortable and okay with the fact that I might die today. I had no problem with that. I figured that's what I deserved. To go from that to having professional elites invite you to the table. The fact that that company even offered me a job, that's another thing. So opportunity, I was an alumni for their program, and my plan was to go to school to get my music therapy degree. And I was going to go to the school that they came from because they came from a college, right?
Yeah.
And when I was getting ready to do that, the college that I was planning to go to that they came from, they defunded the music program. So we were doing Zoom songwriting things, and they invited me to a Zoom conference, and I thought it was just another like songwriting thing. And we got there, and they says, if you want to pursue a music therapy degree, you're going to have to go somewhere else. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not going to go anywhere else. The only reason I want to go to school is because you guys inspired me. And they're like, well, the music program's defunded here. You're going to have to go somewhere else if you want to, but you're not going to need it for this opportunity. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then like one of the professors chimed in. He's like, John, we're offering you a job. You're offering me a job? They're like, yeah, we want to take you on as a songwriting instructor. Your experience is invaluable to us.
And that sort of brings me on to a conversation I've had today. Just because you haven't got a piece of paper that's giving you certification to do something, that doesn't mean you can't do that job. So I've got a friend of mine who I spoke to this morning, and he's into bushcraft. So he likes to go up into the mountains, wild camp, cold water dips, living free, I guess. He's not qualified, but he's been doing it for years. He knows everything about the mountains, how to live, how to do it all safely. And he's nervous about starting his own business up because he hasn't got a fucking piece of paper. And it's, again, it's ironic that, just because you haven't got a qualification, you probably felt the same way. Am I capable? Well, yeah, you clearly are capable, because these more than capable individuals are sat there saying, you don't need to go to school or whatever, we'll give you the job and you can start Monday.
It's like we have to forge a way where there isn't a way. In our experience, experience is in a lot of ways more valuable than a paper education.
Of course, 100%.
And that's literally what they hired me for. Here's the thing. It got weird, right? Over the years working for them, it started to get weird. Why? Well, I don't have a music education. I didn't go to school to be a music teacher. However, the response in the classroom from the inmates was more directed towards me. The inmates wanted to hear from me. They wanted my input. They wanted a connection with me. The guys who went to school for it, they weren't getting that same reaction. So
yeah, it's because you're one of them. That's why. It's because you're one of them people.
Create a little political unrest, right? Because these guys they felt like they should be getting the limelight and the attention, and they had worked for it and had paid for it. It's fair enough. Like, it wasn't my intention to come in shining as bright as I was to like outshine anybody. I was so passionate about this operation, but in the end, like they started to, my paycheck started to get cut incrementally. And it got to the point where I was basically like, I was making $1,600 a month for 4 hours of work. Right. Every week, 4 hours every week, and $1,600 a month plus mileage compensation. That got hacked all the way down to $100 a month. And so this summer, I had a falling out with my colleague, the one who had gone to school and whatnot. He and I didn't see eye to eye. It was an interesting dynamic. I had to basically just eat shit, because the guys are inmates and they can sense egoic tension, right? They can sense all that.
Yeah.
And so instead of having that tension there, I would step to the side. So essentially my teaching was marginalized, when the whole point of the program is to bring forth the marginalized and the people who are dispossessed and give them the center stage. So I got kind of swept to the side. The creative process was kind of franked, and the product started to dwindle, and it wasn't such a good product. So I ended up resigning in September of this year. We had a graduation ceremony for the summer semester, and the sheriff did his thing. He was talking about how proud he was of me and stuff. It's like, you would expect these people to be proud of that. The next morning, I got an email from my boss that said something like, she says that it came from the jail, that I got a criticism that I sing too loud and that I talk about my relationship with the sheriff too much. And it was posed as a question. She's like, can you fix this? And I'm like, well, where does this criticism come from? Because a criticism is only as good as where it comes from, and then I got kind of like weird reactions, and it didn't work out. And I gave them my resignation, and that sent me into kind of a world. I've been in sort of a funk since September, because I had lost this career path that I was going, and I didn't expect to find myself a presence on TikTok. That was just something I was passionate about and having conversations with. My goal was to facilitate this songwriting thing in jails and institutions and make a career out of it. And so to step outside of that was really hard. So it's been a rough couple of weeks.
So, but what type of message does that send to the guys, who were locked up? You look at this guy; he's managed to turn his life around, got himself a job, a career. He got himself a career, and then it's taken away from him because of some stuck-up idiot who feels insecure and victim. He feels a victim, I guess. That's shit.
What killed me is when I asked her, like, where the criticism coming from, and I didn't really get a response. She said, I protect my professional resources. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So every other correspondence we ever got from the jail was a direct screenshot. She would screenshot it and show it. So this screenshot was doctored in a way that I couldn't see where it came from. And basically, I knew the criticism didn't come from the jail. It was a line of bullshit. And it came from the company. It came from my colleague. And I knew that. And I think she knew that I knew that. And I was asking for that clarity, and I wasn't getting it. And so it got to the point where I was told, you fix it or we find someone else. And it's like, if me talking about my relationship with the sheriff is bad for the students, how do we get the sheriff to stop talking about his relationship with me?
I mean, surely
doesn't make any sense.
A conversation between an ex-convict and a member of law enforcement having a good relationship, shouldn't that be something that's spoken about a lot, or to bring a closer relationship between the police and
That's
people
the name
on
of the company.
side?
The name of the company is Opportunity Music Connections. The goal is to create community connections.
It sounds like a fucking hypocritical name, to be honest, but if that's their beliefs, I guess.
That's exactly what the contention was. And so I told her that I was going to resign, and I did it privately. I sent it in a personal message, She did not even acknowledge the resignation and told me that I had to come back to facilitate a few meetings with them to make sure that they knew, like, that they knew how to navigate the responsibilities that I had. It's like, I'm telling you that I'm done, and you're telling me that I need, so you didn't even acknowledge the resignation, and you're telling me to come back to work for you, even though I'm telling you that I'm done, right? So I copy and pasted the exact same message that I did, which was very polite. It was very formal. I even offered them the music that I had created and published under their recording record. Like, that you can have the song. So that Sabrina song does not belong to me. I wrote the song, did the recording and everything. It's my song, but it doesn't belong to me. Any revenue generated from that song will go to Music Opportunity Connections, which I'm not mad about, because they'll still get, it'll help to bring education to other people.
I guess that sort of leads me on to one of the next questions was, could you share probably one of your fondest memories in what your music has done to help somebody else with or their recovery or their rehabilitation or anything like that? Have you got any stories like that?
Absolutely. The first class that I was formally, like, because they kind of brought me in slow. I was there as an intern basically at first, and then I had a formal title as a songwriting instructor, and I was formally co-teaching with an educated professor, right? And we were doing the first class of each semester. We do this exercise where we just throw a line on the board, and we go around the room, and everybody adds to the song, because we're going to show them how easy it is to make music and how we don't have to overthink it. So it goes, we have this song forming, and it gets to this one inmate. His head is down on the table. He's a person of color, and he's trying not to, like, he's embarrassed, because it's kind of embarrassing, especially in the jailhouse setting, right, to be vulnerable or anything like that. And his head is down, and we're like, bro, we need a line from you. And he picked his head up and he said, listen, like, I got nothing. I don't know. We're like, it could literally be anything. He's like, I don't know, but bro, I'm nowhere right now. We're like, that's it. That's perfect. So basically what he was communicating is, I've been at the bottom of the hierarchy, the social hierarchy, my whole life. I'm black, criminalized, I'm institutionalized. I have nothing to offer anybody. Even if I gave you a line, it's not going to be good enough. He was saying that he didn't, just like you and I, we didn't deserve the attention or the spotlight. I had nothing to offer that's going to be any use, right? That's basically what he was saying. And when he said, I'm nowhere right now, that became the name of the song and the hook, the most important part of the song. So that was also the first song that we recorded and published under Opportunity Music. So it's streaming everywhere that you find music. It's called Nowhere Right Now. And yeah, that was probably my greatest memory doing that, because that young man had a sense of purpose, and he was really proud of that work. And then this was at the same time that violinist was around. So we had the violinist had a ticketed event at Mechanics Hall in Worcester, and they rolled down the projector screen and they played the live performance of Nowhere Right Now and a couple of other songs that the inmates wrote.
Do you think you'd be able to send me that song?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I'll put it on the intro to this podcast. I'll use it as the intro music if that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, bro.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And you know what? I have no issue with Opportunity per se. I think, the woman that was running it, she's an incredible human being. She has a long, very respectable portfolio. She's done way more for the community than I could ever imagine. There's no bad blood. It's just, if I was to criticize anything, maybe they would be better to find someone who could manage the operation a little smoother, so that she didn't have to worry about the kind of petty particulars, like a disagreement between two songwriting instructors and stuff like that. There's no bad blood. I wish them the best. But what broke my fucking heart was that nobody from that company reached out to ask me if I was okay. Nobody reached out to ask me if I was still sober. Nobody reached out to see what the problem was or if there was any way we could reconcile it. it was complete radio silence, and their whole thing is supposed to be centered around bringing like those people to the center again. Like I felt like I was tokenized. I mean, as a white dude, that's a weird feeling. Like I didn't, it's like they only wanted me there because of my experience. But when I shared my experience, it's like, well, don't share that part of your experience. Like be there, but don't say anything, kind of participate, but don't participate. It was just this really weird sort of thing. Nobody reached out. The only person who reached out was the sheriff. The sheriff himself actually reached out. And then he went out of his way to spend time with me. So we went and got a coffee to talk about, and
that's what baffles me, man, is you've got this, business that's there to help people like you. And what they've done is they've done the fucking polar opposite,
And I don't even think that was I don't think that they see it that way. I don't think that was their intention. I have gone back and forth about even talking about this publicly because I don't want them to have a bad reputation or anything. I do feel like I brought a lot to the company. I'm hoping that it's able to sustain itself beyond my exit. I hope nothing but the best for them. Honest to God.
I think, when your journey now, mate, is you've just got to look at it as it's just a moment in time on your journey to the next thing. I didn't see myself sitting there having a conversation with a guy from Boston, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now I am, For me, this is a big thing for me at the moment, but it's just a journey onto the next thing and to the next thing. And, as long as we're improving, I think, and as long as we're trying to do the right things, and that it doesn't always turn out that way. That's just life, man. One thing I've realized, mate, over the last few years, this famous line in Oasis song, you just got to roll with it. You got to roll with it.
It's funny you say that. My sponsor's wife recently passed away, and I used to run this voluntary music and recovery thing at a local recovery center every weekend. And the idea was that people in recovery could come in and share a song that resonates with them. And then we would listen to the song and then talk about it afterwards. It was a very therapeutic experience. And his wife came one time, and she was just this little enlightened lady. I mean, when I tell you that this woman looks when she walked, I mean, she was just like so graceful. Everything about her was just full of light and love and beauty, and you would never expect it. But she came to the meeting, and she requested the song by REO Speedwagon, "Roll with the Changes." And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that song, but
no,
it's like at the end of the movie when you get that freeze frame and then the credits start rolling. Like, this is the song that you would use. And she just passed away in September. She woke up in the morning, didn't feel right, went about her routine, and then went back to her bed. She took her slippers off and she slipped back into her bed, naked as the day she was born, and she laid there and passed away. It's almost like she knew it was going to happen. And it's like, what an exit for such a person. Catherine was something else. She's made quite the impact on people in this area.
I think a lot of the time, especially with the elderly generation, they know when it's going to happen. I was very close with my nana and granddad, my grandparents, and my grandfather was like, he raised me pretty much. He was my father figure for a long time, and he passed away December 2019. And my grandmother, I've always said, mate, I didn't think you could die from a broken heart. I've never seen it. I've only seen this in romance films and shit like that, She passed away from me. She knew. She was in and out of hospital multiple times, but she'd always come home. And then this one time she went, and I think she knew. She knew she was gonna die, man. And she didn't come home. She died, with a nurse by her side late at night, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I think. But she knew, she knew she was going to go. I don't want to say who, but somebody close to me and my missus passed away last couple of weeks. More to my missus, and they'd planned the aftermath of their passing. That's crazy. They planned, all the necessary proceedings and processes. And I just think, some people just know, It's crazy, man.
I'm curious. You said that he passed away in December of 2019. What was the date?
27th.
Okay, because that's eerily close to the graduation ceremony that we had at the jail. It was December of 2019, but it was the 12th or 13th of that year. I mean, astrologically, it's basically the same exact time, right? If you're talking about the entire universe, it's like that's pretty close.
Yeah.
That's an interesting synchronicity.
It's funny. It's when I talk about the strength of the mind or the weakness of the mind. You know, the story I'm getting to, when my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer in, I'd probably say June, maybe that year, and they told him that he'd be dead by September. This is the sheer power and determination of the mind and soul. They told him he'd be dead by September, and he said, "I'm not dying until I've seen the grandchildren open their Christmas presents on Christmas Day." And he died on the 27th of December.
Wow.
He said he was going to die in the chair, his chair that he sat in every day, and he died in his chair 2 days after Christmas, man. And that's fucking powerful stuff.
Death is a really important part of this whole thing. I think it's got a bad rep. I'm so grateful for Sabrina that she showed me that death can be a beautiful thing.
Mm.
So I published my first song this summer, my first original song. When I got out, like 4 days after I got out, I watched the movie The Dirt. Have you ever seen that? The Motley Crue movie?
No.
It's about the band Motley Crue from the US.
Yeah.
And it inspired, movies often inspired me to write music. I don't know what it is about that, but I went in the basement, I wrote Sabrina's song, and we published that this summer. And it's interesting to me that this woman, by the way, when we got intimate, when the clothes came off, she was glowing. And I don't mean that in like a metaphorical sense. I mean, like when those clothes came off, she was radiant. There was an aura of light around this woman. I literally seen it with my own eyes. And I used to think to myself, what the fuck, like, what is that? And then for her to be like that angel for me, like literally that angel, and her passing encouraged me to write a song, which became the very first song that I ever published. Right. And as a singer and songwriter, publishing music is something I've always wanted to do. Right. So the fact that I told her that we would be together forever when I got my shit together, I just didn't think that it was going to be in the form of a song.
Yeah.
Right. Because now we're intimately connected. Her story's a part of my story. And then her song happens to be the very first song that I ever did publish. So that's another song that you can check out if you're interested. It's Sabrina's song by John Wayne Cormier Jr. I would recommend that you check it out. It came out.
Yeah, cool.
It came out amazing. It sounds like a rock ballad, like from the 80s, which is pretty cool because Sabrina was like a tough chick, so it kind of fit her personality.
I love rock music. I fancy myself as a bit of a singer myself. I can sing pretty well, to be fair. It's when I was 16, I used to be in a rap group.
Yeah.
And we were pretty good. For our age, we were pretty good. We started, though, we had like American accents and stuff because we like listening to Eminem and things like this. We put on this fake American accent. But then, obviously, when British grime music and, the rap started, London and Manchester and places like that, and we sort of started getting our own accents and things. And we played in some good clubs. We played in the club in Liverpool. Have you heard of the Arctic Monkeys? Have you heard of them?
I have.
Yeah, so we played in the same places they did. So we were good. It was a teenage thing, but we were good at it. It was enjoyable. I've got quite a lot of friends in the who were involved with music. My cousin, I'm not sure. Have you heard of Pete Doherty? Have you heard of him?
No.
So he's like a British rock. Lived a crazy lifestyle. He's a heroin addict, and he was married. I think he was married to Kate Moss, the model, supermodel. Okay. I might be wrong in saying that, but I think he was. But my cousin Callum threw an album on the stage to him maybe 10 years ago, just because my cousin's he's like punk rock, my cousin, like punk rock music. And he threw his album on the stage to Pete Doherty. A few weeks later, he was touring Europe with him. He went around Europe touring with just from throwing his album on the stage.
You never know. Well, it's like the people who, first of all, you should get back into that.
Yeah.
Even just, bro, Listen, I rapped a little bit too, like rapping something fun. Maybe we can collab on something and put something out there. That'd be a lot of fun. I'd be down to do that. I have a producer and stuff. And we could figure that out. I don't know if you have anybody on your end, but I'd be open to that.
Yeah,
Something.
My cousin Callum, he's a music producer. He's in and out of Spain. He goes to Spain 3 or 4 times a year to work with producers and other musicians.
Let's do it.
He's doing really well at the moment with a guy. I think he's Scottish, Stag Boy, his name is, and they're doing good things on the scene at the moment. So yeah, but yeah, I'd do it for a bit of fun. Maybe I'd do it for a bit of fun.
That's the way you have to do it. You can't approach music or anything creative like you want to make money from it. You have to approach it like something that I like to do and enjoy to do. It's for sure that's how it works. You know, I'm grateful just to have a conversation with you and dig deeper. I don't know about you, but it's strange. You seem strangely familiar. Like here you are across the pond. No idea. You know, we chatted a few times on TikTok, but you look like a kid that I grew up with, which is pretty interesting. You know, at this stage of my life, dude, you know, I'm in this weird sort of like nebulous. Like I don't know how else to explain it. Like I'm in between like whatever's gonna happen and what did happen, right? And it's been really hard to navigate that. I didn't expect to have any kind of a presence on TikTok. Literally, I just got in and started arguing with people. I was passionate, and I would. What led me to that? So I wanted to ask you that too. What was it about the? Was it the Men Are Toxic live that you that you saw? So when you were scrolling FYP and you saw that page, what was it that drew you in?
So this was, I was going to get onto this topic. So I hate the word triggered. I fucking hate that word. I feel as though it's a very modern word, you know? Everybody uses this word lately. Just, it pissed me off a little bit. I'm not, you know? But I think, and this is, I was speaking to my girlfriend before, that's the reaction that you want, I think. You're actively looking for that. Not in a bad way either. I think you're looking at it, even though, because, and I'm not, well, you take it how you want, but you come across as a bit of a dick on there at times.
It's intentional.
What I agree, and this is where I was going. I believe you're doing it because soon as within the first 10 seconds, you didn't even say hello to me or nothing, you know? It was, what do you want? Straight away, what do you want? What's your name? Pronouns. And I thought, fucking, you know, straight away, you know what I mean? You're back, but within 5-10 seconds, mate, I knew what you were doing. So then after 20 seconds of me and you speaking, we were fine. We were speaking like this, you know? But since then, I have a little look and I drop in on your conversations and I laugh because there's a lot of people that don't understand what you're trying to do. And they'll say, well, women are toxic as well. And you're like, well, we're not talking about women. We're having a conversation on us. And it's that ownership and accountability factor that people don't want to address in themselves that makes them push it onto other people. And all you're really doing is trying to say, look, we've all got a fucking problem. Let's try and address it. And let's try and get there together. And that's it. That's what I believe that was my exact thoughts. It really got me back up. I thought, who's this fucking motherfucker here trying to say all men are toxic? Do you know what I mean? But
it's so good to hear that because, okay, so there's a few things. Like the old man who approached me and put his finger immediately on what I was doing wrong pissed me off, bro. The guy who even was walking past me and said, you should go to a meeting, that pissed me off. Like, I have come to learn in recovery that the things that piss me off are the exact things that I should lean into to understand. Because if I have a reaction, my reaction is my responsibility. You can say something or do something that's on you, but the way I react to that's the only thing that I can control. So when I have that reaction, I try to pay attention to those people. So the reason that that's set up that way, and I'm giving it away while there's a TikTok live stream going right now, a part of it's rejection therapy. A part of it's like a litmus test. A part of it is to see if I'm going to get a reaction. Because if I'm going to get a reaction, then I'm going to press on that reaction. And the reason that I want to do that is because I want to show you how useless it is to be self-centered in the moment with our emotion. Like, if you can get through the jabs, because there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Straight away.
It's
What
like,
do you want? When you said to me, what do you want? And even the age and pronouns thing, which I get, society heads that way. For me, same as yourself, I grew up in a very old school mentality. I'm 30. I don't need to explain my age and pronouns,
I understand.
but I did it to play the game because I knew there was a game behind what you were doing. But yeah, I enjoy it, man. I sit there now and I laugh, listening to people blab on and on and on. And when you start with the fucking chapstick, man,
Baby come back.
It's funny.
Yeah, the baby come back segment's great.
Yeah.
And that's just me being creative and kind of silly and whatever. That's all. That's what That's what I've always done. But I never really was comfortable enough to do it. Like, I always thought, like, people are gonna think this or that of me. I get a lot of criticism. People are not happy with my approach, and I don't care. And the reason I say that is not in a non-empathic kind of way. The reason I don't care is because I don't care how you get your life back together. I don't care what method you use. If it happens to be scrolling through TikTok and you see a live stream that pisses you off, which exactly happened to me, which was Chantal Hyde, shout out to Canada's dating coach. I was scrolling FYP. I saw her live. Her voice pissed me off. Her method pissed me off. Her approach pissed me off. I was uncomfortable, so I leaned in, because that man who approached me and pissed me off, if I didn't swallow that shit and think about what he told me, the things that I have in my life today, I wouldn't have. That guy, because I took his suggestion, because mind you, when he said that to me and I had the reaction, I went home and let sleep over that for like 2 weeks. I was tossing and turning, thinking of all the different ways I was going to tell him off. Who the fuck is that guy? He doesn't have a right to fucking tell me anything. I can identify what I want. He doesn't know my fucking story. The same old shit. You were talking about it earlier. I have a right to destroy myself. You don't know what I've been through. I can back myself up into a corner because, it was like my excuse. So when I was able to settle down, when the emotions started to settle, and then I started to think clearly, I realized that this guy's been sober for 40-something years. He's a multi-millionaire, and he came literally from nothing. So why don't I give it a shot? And when I went back to that meeting and I took his suggestion, that old man and I connected in a way that I'll never be able to explain. Nobody was going to give me a job. I have a terrible record. He gave me a job. Nobody was going to offer me an apartment. I have a terrible record. He offered me an apartment. Nobody was going to take the time to listen to my bullshit unless I was willing to listen to their bullshit and also take the suggestions. So the life that I have learned from that one reaction. So I got to TikTok. Everything on the TikTok is pissing me off. All the progressive rhetoric, all of these things. I put on the conservative gloves and I was boxing as hard as I could for the conservative thought process. I was really giving it my best, no matter how often I spoke for the right. There was holes poked in my logic, and I was talking to people who had an idea of what they were talking about. So I started to identify with what they were talking about because it made more sense to me. And I started to change. A self-actualization process started to initiate. I started to realize who I actually am, not who I used to be, but who I am and who I'm becoming. So I have that to say, and I say it all the time on TikTok: pay attention to the shit that pisses you off. Pay attention to your emotions. Your emotions are a primal motor function in our body. God knows how old that chemical reaction is, right? When you're angry or upset or uncomfortable, that's an indicator that you should pay attention very closely. And so that's why I run that platform. That's why I run that channel.
This brings me on to my next experience with fucking TikTok. I don't really do many lives. I like to, have a look at people and listen to people. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy listening to people. So I was about to jump into the shower. I want to know what you think of this. So was it last night? I think it was last night. We're about to jump into the shower and you sit on the toilet, and as you're doing, you're scrolling through that for 5-10 minutes. So I come across this lady. I'm going to call her a lady, but I could call her a hell of a lot more. So I didn't enter a live chat, and she invited me She said, oh, there's a podcast, so I'll invite him in. So I was really polite. So it's, hello, she said. Her first words, similar to yourself, but I knew this was going to be a completely different conversation. I understood you within 10 seconds. I still don't understand this woman now. So her first words were, why have you got a fucking podcast? And I was like, right, okay. So I said, I enjoy speaking to people. I enjoy being educated. I enjoy learning. I enjoy listening to people's stories. And she said, yeah, but you've got a mental health podcast. So I said, yeah, what I do is, similar to somebody like yourself, people who've been in a dark place and then come back and they're doing good things with their lives. I like to hear those stories. And if that with their authorization, we put the podcast on social media for other men to hear. As we know, I believe, since the pandemic, there's a mental health pandemic in itself in the world. There's many people hurting themselves, more so the majority of men. So, for me, there's something needs to be at least tried to be done about it. But anyway, this woman's next words blew my fucking mind. She said to me that I'm weaponizing suicide and I am a misogynistic, low-life piece of shit. And I was baffled. I didn't know what to say. So I just remained polite as I could be while this woman splurged on for 5 or 10 minutes that because I'm not a professional, that I shouldn't be speaking to people who've got traumatic issues, that the NHS, which is the British Medical Service, don't allow non-professionals to communicate, which is all a load of bollocks. Everybody advocates for peer-on-peer communication when it comes to trauma and things like this. And it was my first ever real negative experience when it comes to anything to do with what I believe is a good thing with the podcast, I believe that it's a good thing that men should speak. You hear stories like yours. There might be a young lad who enjoys music or, anything. And they could take any relevance from this conversation today. Me personally, I don't see any negativity in that whatsoever. But it was the fact that she asked me about the patriarchy. She said what? And as soon as she said it, I knew straight away she was a feminist, which is fine because do what you want with your life. And I said, well, I don't speak about the patriarchy. That's not really my thing. I don't want, like my girlfriend said, I don't really want to deviate from the direction that I want to go just to suit somebody else's narrative, So I said to her, I'm not interested in the patriarchy. Straight away, oh, so you're a misogynistic piece of shit as well, she said. I was like, wow. And even now, like, I think she's been hurt, obviously. There's obviously an experience in her life where she's been treated badly by a man, wherever that may be. But the sheer amount of abuse I got, even from women in the chat, and they were all giving me shit, and I just come out of there and it blew my mind. But what you just said there, have you ever seen a film, The Good Will Hunting, in Boston? Robin Williams, Matt Damon. It's my favourite film of all time, my favourite film. And it's when Robin Williams is sat in the room with Matt Damon, when Matt Damon's just ripped his life apart with the painting, that scene. And they're sat on the bench. And he says to Matt Damon, you could quote Shakespeare about love and things like this. And Robin Williams says to him, I thought about you all night. And then I thought about one thing and I fell fast asleep and I haven't thought about you since. And it was that woman genuinely didn't know what she was talking about. She really didn't. And as soon as I thought of that last night, it took me about 3 hours because I was sat there racking my brains thinking, what have I done wrong? And then in the end, like my missus said, there's always going to be somebody out there who disagrees with you. And since then, I've not really thought about it until I'm obviously sat here speaking with you because it was something I wanted to highlight and get your views on.
So the Robin Williams thing, there's a controversy in Boston recently where that bench now has a statue of Robin Williams.
Good.
But people were all upset about that because he's not from Boston, but it's the iconic scene from Good Will Hunting. I have a sneaking suspicion that I know exactly who that content creator is, and I was wondering if you were willing to name them.
again, I did. She's British. She's a British lady.
Okay. Not the
I
one.
can't remember the
one I
name.
was thinking of.
Yeah, but she was sat there on going off camera, drinking. So she was clearly, she'd had a few too many. But man, just the sheer amount of fucking hatred and abuse from somebody, like Robin Williams says, she tried to rip my whole fucking world apart. I mentioned to her, she said, do you have any experience with mental health? I said, well, of course I do. I said, I'm not willing to speak about it on a live, but I see a therapist every now and then and I'm trying to be better and better all the time. She asked me if I speak to women. I said that I'd done a documentary with the BBC Wales last year advocating for the safety of women and against violence in men. So I was a part of that. And her next words were, or just before I left, sorry, she said, why don't you go and speak about your fucking podcast to your therapist? And I was like, wow, where's all this hate coming from? It was just, I don't know, it blew me away, man. It's fucking, but it's scary though. It's scary as well, though, that there's people out there with that mindset.
So here's the thing, and take this as you will. Take this with a grain of salt. She held up a mirror. She held up a mirror and brought to surface some pretty intense emotions that already exist within you. They're already there. You and I have gone through different levels of trauma and experience. And when you're explaining all this about your interaction with this woman, you mentioned that she's clearly been hurt.
Yeah.
And really what that is a psychological projection. You've been hurt.
I agree.
You've been hurt.
Yeah.
So when she, first of all, you fell into her snare. So what was the prompt?
100% I fell in.
Do you remember what the prompt was?
She thinks that I'm a disgrace for trying to monetize mental health.
No. What was what pulled you into her page?
I was just literally scrolling. As I got there, she was talking about, I think she was talking about women's rights or something. Similar to your page, she had something. That was it. So the prompt was, men don't give a shit about women. They say they do, but they really don't.
Okay.
So I sat there and yeah, that was it.
Okay. Has there ever been a time in your life where you claimed that you gave a shit about women, but you really didn't?
Of course.
Of course. Right. So that's why you were pulled into that, because there's still a wound there that you haven't healed.
So let me just interrupt 1 second. Me and my missus had a very, very deep conversation along those lines. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this bit, but I was hurt from a young age by females. So then I grew up with probably a disrespect towards females, and I'm still working on that wound to a certain degree.
To get too specific on what happened or anything like that, can you just say who? Was it like a relative or a family member?
Yeah.
So,
no, she knows. I'm working on it, man. Me and my mum have never written.
I knew it was your mom.
Yeah.
I knew it was your mom. You know why I knew? Because the same thing with me, bro.
Yeah.
Same thing. And that is what I'm continuously trying to work on. I'm continuously trying to forgive her, and forgive myself.
Same.
Because nobody wants to hate their mother. Nobody wants to be resentful towards the one. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't hate her. I think I was just, again, I've said a lot, and the life doesn't come with a rule book or a guidebook, Like, I listened to something about parenthood because I've made a lot of mistakes myself as a parent.
Yeah.
We do the best we can with what we know. And that hit home with me a lot. We do the best we can with what we know at that time. What we know is what we know. We don't know anything different,
So do you think it would be more accurate to say you hated not your mom, but you hated your emotional reaction to what happened with you and your mom?
Yeah. I don't hate my mom. I just hate the
the way.
moments in time that we've experienced. You know,
Okay. So
I love my mum, but there's a
and this is a deep-seated wound. This is something from childhood, early childhood, like before 3 to 5, or after,
around there and above.
around and above. Okay. So you're 37 years old. So think of it like this: all of your experiences are like piled up. Down at the bottom of your experiences is that interaction. So when you saw a post like that, where you know that because of that interaction, you started to have negative experience with women growing up.
Yeah.
Probably in relation to your self-centeredness and the egotistical flame that was burning inside of you that you were aiming to satiate however you could, regardless of who you hurt in the process.
Yeah.
Something I can identify with, right? So you got this life experience piled up on top of that. And then you get to the top of where you're at now, and you try to peel back these layers, right? This woman brought to the surface the oldest part of your resentment, the oldest part of like what it's probably what set into motion all of the things that we do to make ourselves feel better, right? So
I agree. Yeah.
So this is, even though it was very unpleasant for you, I would encourage you to go back. Go back and not go back to engage, but go back to listen and just listen to that woman and listen to what she has to say, because your ego wants to do everything but that. You'll probably sleep well knowing that you never had to talk to her again. I've had similar experiences with content creators where they got into my head so much where I was tossing and turning for hours after the conversation with a chat that was berating me. This is why social justice is important. And we know this because we grew up on the streets. There's nothing more important to us than our reputation, right? Men value their reputation almost above everything else. So when you are socially shamed, it's a very effective tool. And that's part of the reason why I do what I do on TikTok. So you took the bait. She put pressure on a wound of yours that bubbled to the surface, an issue that you're still trying to reconcile. So for that exact reason, if I was you, I would go back to that very, very content and just listen and pay attention, because there's probably a message there for you that's going to help you reconcile that wound. That's what I learned by paying attention to the more intense the emotion, the more important it is that I pay attention to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll give that a go. Yeah, it's okay. Okay.
She might invite you again. And you don't have to accept the invitation. But if you approach the conversation with genuine curiosity, and if you take the jabs, I mean, it's not. You can literally just remind yourself that this is a conversation. I'm not going to get hurt. This is a conversation. No one's going to hurt me. I've done that because when you're in the guest box, you don't have the camera on, right? So it's helpful. One way to ground yourself when you're in a heated conversation is to touch your heart.
Yeah.
Like it just feel the beat of your heart, because it connects. The Heart Math Institute has done some research on this, where it connects the logic to the emotional, right? Because the heart actually has its own little center that has its own little memory source. We've proven this recently. The Heart Math Institute is you store memory in your heart. There's a part of your heart that stores memory. So if you it might help. I don't know. The basic breathing techniques, stuff like that will help.
Yeah.
When you mute, you can mute for a second, take a couple of really deep breaths, like if you're getting worked up. But it's important to work through that shit. This is exposure therapy, bro. This is rejection therapy. This is the more you confront the shadow self, the part of you that you don't want to put attention on, the more you're going to grow. Because
that's Carl Jung's methodology, isn't it? It's Jungian methodology, which it's something that I've started listening to a lot lately. Is like that's what we spoke about in the live that time, the shadow self. And if you don't pay attention to all the bad sides of you'll never get rid of them. And that's what I'm trying to do now,
And the emotion itself is not exactly bad, right? A negative emotion is not exactly bad. it's useful, right? We have this moral thing where we want to put like a label on what's bad and what's good. A negative emotion is not exactly bad unless you pull the trigger. Like, if you have a pew-pew laying on the table, that ain't gonna hurt nobody, bro. That thing can sit there until 2087. Nothing's gonna happen unless you set into motion that mechanism, right? Yeah. So if we get triggered at any point, which happens all the time for a person in recovery, right? I'm learning how to live my whole life again. I have no idea how to function as an adult. I have no idea how to process emotion. But if I don't pull the trigger, then that reaction can be useful. So in other words, if you don't explode, it sounds like you didn't. It sounds like you didn't. Did you?
No.
Okay. So that's progress, bro. Because man to man, I'm assuming that that's not how it would have went before you started doing some introspection. Am I right?
I'd have been, if we want my honest opinion, if that was 3 years ago, she'd have got the fuck you. That's what she would have got straight away.
And not least the fuck you. Like, that's probably what would have started, which then she would have automatically given that right back to you, which it would have elevated, and that's not useful. So the fact that you were able to take it and not elevate in real time, and then afterwards bring it to someone you love and trust and process it, that's fucking huge, bro. That's a monumental step forward.
Yeah, and that's when I genuinely believe I am. My ability to not react and really think of. I'm learning, I'm learning a lot.
Absolutely.
I'm learning.
I've heard this in recovery, and it might be useful for you. The first 3 thoughts are for entertainment purposes only.
First 3 thoughts for
first 3 thoughts. If somebody says something to you that invokes emotion, whatever you think of as a response, the first one, the second one, or third one are not the things to say. Like, that's just for entertainment purposes. The 4th or 5th, now you're getting closer to something that you probably should say. Or no reaction is also a reaction. You don't even have to react. That's another thing. I'm a very reactive person, and I'm learning that I don't have to react to everything. I don't have to go to every fight that I'm invited to. And I learned that when that kid hit me twice, right? I didn't have to react. Walking away from that kid was the best thing that I ever went through. Like, for me, the bigger man walks away. So it's like very uncomfortable experience, but something that allowed you to grow because you didn't react, not in real time. You were able to harness that emotion, which is something that men often aren't capable of doing. And then you found a healthier outlet to process it, which you had your partner, your product. We're talking about it now. This is okay. So you think about it like neurologically, right? Are you a religious person?
Not to a particular individual religion, but I believe that there's something.
Are you familiar with like the Bible at all? Any of the stories in the Bible?
Yeah. I like history, and history involves religion, and so I know certain things.
The story that I like to relate this neurological growth to is the story of Exodus. And I was just talking about this on my live earlier today. In the story of Exodus, you have a whole body of people who are being tyrannized by the Egyptians, right? They're being forced into, it's forced labor, it's slavery. But even under that oppression, they're being fed, they're being housed, and they're being nourished, right? Even though it's not what they want, it's what's being forced on them, it's still provided. So when when a revolution strikes and they liberate themselves from the oppression, they're now in the desert.
Right? So just to interrupt, Exodus is the liberation through Moses, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So Moses takes a moment to go there to have some introspection. He goes to the mountain to sit and reflect.
Yeah. With a burning bush.
He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do. They're asking for a revolution and for liberation. He doesn't really know if that's the right thing to do or what. But anyway, he gets his message. He comes back with the order, right? And then he presents that to his people, and the liberation. So they apply order. The liberation occurs. Now they're in the desert. Okay. So when you're in the desert, you don't have any food, you don't have any shelter, you don't have any clothing, you don't have any water, you're disoriented because there's no direction, right? So think about this psychologically. The tyranny that you're under is like that experience with your mom. That's the thing that you're used to. It's the motor function that propels you into anger and rage, and it doesn't take much of a trigger to bring that out. That's what you're used to. So last night when you had that conversation with that woman, you were thrown into the desert, right? Because you have this emotional reaction that you don't, because now you're trying to be aware of your emotions and you don't want to just react and indulge. So you don't really know exactly what to do. And the reason being is because the tyranny is like one part of your brain. You're stuck in this pattern, right? But when you're presented with a novel occurrence, like something that's new to you, like talking to that woman, you're starting to get out of that spot where you're used to thinking. So you're branching out. And of course, branching out of that is like, it's scary. It creates anxiety. And it's like, now what? I don't know where to go because I'm in new territory. Like you're forging new pathways. So anytime I'm presented with anger, frustration, fear, denial, any intense emotion, I know that the word that comes to mind is the word interesting. I try to say interesting because when I say that, it gives me it broadens it out a bit. So instead of saying, well, bullshit, or like, like you or anything like that, it's like I say interesting because that gives me a minute to.
It's funny. I don't know where I've heard it. I think it's off a British comedy. Me and my girlfriend say it a lot. I can't remember. Was it Ricky Gervais on The Office or something? And they say when you say the words interesting, it means you've generally not got a fucking clue what to do or what's going on.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so I use that. I use that tool sometimes when I had arguments or disagreements with my partner. I would say the word interesting because she would present me with something that I didn't agree with or that I didn't like, or she'd point out to some behavior of mine that was improper. And my natural reaction to that is like defense mode, but instead of going into defense, I tell myself, well, that's interesting. And then I ask a question. Well, what was it about that? What was it about that what can I do better about that? Or like, how can I acknowledge when you're going through that? Like, can you give me an indicator that this is some, but just to ask qualifying questions to try to understand. Anytime I come up to like an intense emotion, my ego is telling me to push that shit out and deflect, defend, deny, push it away. But what I should do is encounter it. I should squarely confront the things that make me uncomfortable so that I can understand how and why I'm reacting that way. And then you start peeling back layers of that onion, man. And every layer that comes off, you're closer and closer to your truest version of yourself. And this is a practice, bro. I am no pro at this at all. There are people in my life on a regular basis that piss me off, and I surround myself with them for that exact purpose. They're going to tell me when I'm off the beam. They're going to tell me the things that I don't like to hear. And I'm going to bite my tongue and hear it out, whether I want to hear it or not. And it's helpful.
With me and my missus, I like to think I'm quite an educated person, but I think every debate or battle me and her have ever had, she's absolutely fucking destroyed me. But it's good because she's a clever person. She is an educated person. She's really good. She thinks, she's very critical with her thinking. She's brilliant at critical thinking. And like I said, we've been together 2 years now, and I've learned more about myself and especially how to approach situations. I've learned a lot more from her than I have ever, like say 2 years ago or plus, before that. There's been many scenarios where I'd have just exploded or, just done something fucking stupid. There was a couple 4 or 5 years ago, I nearly went to jail, very, very close to going to jail because I was just reacting the wrong way to everything. And since I've met her, man, honestly, she's changed my whole output and made something that was impossible achievable for me. Just something like this, I really believe if I can put my heart and soul into this, what I'm doing, who knows where it'll go,
We just keep doing it regardless of what the results are, and then the results kind of start to speak for themselves. This partner that you have now, right? When I got into recovery before, the reason it never worked for me is because I would get there and immediately assume that I had all the answers and I was going to tell them how to do it, right? The reason that never worked is because my thinking is what got me there in the fucking first place.
Yeah, same.
Right. So if I want to stay, it's one thing to make the decision to get sober. It's one thing to stop drinking, right? Or to stop raging, right? Because a lot of us are rageaholics too, right? It's one thing to stop that. It's another thing to learn how to navigate those emotions and feelings in the future. And I don't know about you, but I had no fucking clue how to do that. So I had to open up and listen to people. And that's part of how I got to the niche I have on TikTok, because there were people who pissed me off and I paid attention to that, and it opened me up to better understanding. So if I want to stay sober, I might listen to the people who've been able to do it and stay sober for 40 years, right? Because I don't know how to stay sober. I know how to get drunk and party and rage and go to jail. I've got all those boxes checked, right? I know how to do that. But when it comes to staying sober, I can get sober. I've done that 1,000 times. How many times did I get sober? How many times, but how do I stay sober? So I have to consider the ideas of other people. Humans are unique in that way because we can let the idea die instead of us. I can also stubbornly take the idea straight to death. You know what I mean? Like we have done that. But if we let our ideas kind of evaporate, that's taking the mask off, bro. That's stepping outside of the character that you don't have to identify with that person anymore. But it's taking the advice and suggestions and having conversations like this with a genuine curiosity. You struck me as a genuinely curious person.
Yeah.
And then you want to have an extended conversation. I'm happy to do it. I'm glad that we were able to connect. And I think that this is the beginning of something really awesome for not just you, but for both of us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think so. Yeah, in the future, like say, I'm quite curious now as to this music thing. I might just do it for a laugh, man. Just do it because it's something to enjoy, I suppose. But yeah, we'll see. It's interesting. You've got me interested. I've got an idea of maybe do something around like a mental health song or something, So yeah.
That passion you have, bro. So some of us, the people who are angry and emotional and passionate, that's usually what it is that we're deeply passionate and we're deeply empathic.
Yeah.
We don't know how to harness that, right? So we have a saying in recovery, it's like, if you still have character defects, it's because you're just not using them properly. Right. It's not a character defect if you learn how to harness it and make something from it. So I'm snarky, condescending, egotistical, self-centered, and entitled. What's a good way to monetize that? Well, to have a platform where I'm snarky, condescending, egotistical, self-centered.
That's yeah. Well, that's at first one of the things that got me with you as well was you kept reading the definition of toxic masculinity out. When I was sat there, this is
the word toxic.
Yeah, sorry, just the word toxic.
Yep.
And I was sat there thinking, you're literally doing everything that definition is saying right now. And that's what made me laugh, because the guy in the box couldn't pick up on it. And I was thinking, he's doing it purely out of sarcasm. That's the way I interpreted it.
Well, it's a representation of exactly what the problem is. And because the statement I usually get, it's something like, oh, well, what do you think, you're different or you're special or something like that? It's like, no, I am toxic. Don't get it twisted. And it can come out like that. Right. And, but you'll notice, because there are conversations I have, like the one I had with you, and the plenty of conversations I have with young men who come on the platform that completely unravel. They tell me names, they freak out, they cuss, they rage, they leave, and then I've seen a few. Or they direct message me and they say, "Dude, you know what? Thank you. Like that was actually really helpful." Or people who can take the jabs and they can navigate through it. And then they start asking questions, and then we actually have a conversation. And having that conversation, because they're asking qualified questions, you don't see that same toxic proclivity come raging out, right? And so, but I think the reason I brought that up is because when we're acting toxic, we get toxic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
It brings it right out of us. It brings it right out of other people. So if we as men are acting very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way, we're going to get that back. The thing is, we are very harmful, we are very unpleasant, and it's very insidious, and it's not obvious to us that we're acting that way often, right? You can make a case for that being nature or nurture. You could argue about that. I think it's both.
Yeah, both.
But the bottom line is it's not going away.
No.
It's not going away.
So what is your answer then? Is your answer to, like everything we just spoke about there, really learn to understand and accept what is wrong with us, and through the growth mindset, learn to develop and adapt and just become overall better? Is that what your sort of general answer would be to the topic that you speak about on your socials?
For men, we have to be aware of our emotions, because our society has, since the dawn of time, encouraged men to stuff, repress, deny, and accuse away all of our emotion. Deflect, deny, refuse. We have to be aware of when that's happening. That's what I'm doing on the socials. My goal is to provide a reaction and then hold up the mirror and say, look,
Okay.
take a look, Yep. Take a look at what this is causing and what you're doing. And a lot of times when that emotion settles, or if in real time I can get them to realize that they are centered on their emotion. So there's a difference between being aware of your emotion and being controlled by it.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that make sense? So we have to separate ourselves from getting, my friend of mine calls it indulging. Don't indulge in your emotion. Like, be aware of it. Like, you can even say it in your head, like, okay, this is making me angry. That's interesting. Something like that. It's very useful, because what happens is that separates me from the emotion that I'm having in real time. So if I'm getting angry, it's like, okay, I'm angry. That's interesting. And then I'm not as angry as I am because I just internally validated that emotion. Because for you and I, and for a lot of men out there, we never had that validation.
Do you believe that there's a possibility that we could, what's the word that I'm looking for, sort of overexert ourselves into the interest of our own emotions? I'm trying to find the right words to explain what I mean.
100% takes balance. Yeah, because if you get too concerned with yourself, well, they've done studies to prove that your self-consciousness is neuroticism. It's the same thing. So, like, it's like a singer or a songwriter or a comedian on stage. You ever see, or have you ever done a public, even talking live on TikTok or anything like that? You have a moment of self-awareness, and then you realize that you had a moment of self-awareness, and then your whole train of thought gets derailed. And
yeah.
Right. So that tells you right there that it's not useful to stay entirely involved in self. You have to be self-aware, but you don't want to be self-consumed. So what I found useful to mitigate that is volunteer work.
Okay.
I don't care where you live. You can go to your local town hall and tell them that you're interested in volunteering. They'll find you a committee or a board to be a part of. No problem. There are homeless shelters. There are recovery resources. The reason that this is helpful is because you're making a connection with another human being. And if I'm too concerned with myself, then I'm going to be disconnected and sort of shut up and isolate. And that's not helpful either. So if I get on an island of emotion and I'm guilty of this. I've done this recently, where I get on this sort of isolated island of recollection, and there's merit to that, but I don't want to get stuck there. So the best thing to do is to connect with another human being, especially if it's voluntary, because it's voluntary and not public. Like I can't fucking stand those people that do like charity work on camera. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree. People, they go into the subways and they'll buy a McDonald's or something for somebody who's homeless, and they'll record it. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
It's despicable. The reason I hate that is because those people are overlooked on a regular basis. People don't even acknowledge that they're alive. They don't even look at them like humans. They're in the way. They're an eyesore, right? And for someone to have the fucking camera rolling and go out of their way to rush them and to give them a present or a gift or money or something like that, you don't even realize that the camera is rolling. They don't even care. They're being acknowledged by someone, and it's kind of coercive and manipulative to use like bait, and pull them in and say, well, here's your gift. And then, you're really just monetizing their story. Right. And I don't know. I hate that shit. So if you're going to try to get out of the rabbit hole of self-reflection, working with others is key. That's why I have those conversations on TikTok Live. That helps me stay out of myself because I'm genuinely curious in human connection and conversation and networking.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And that's an avenue to stay in. But some sort of voluntary work, I don't care what it is. I go to the jail once every Thursday to volunteer and talk to the guys about recovery. So that's one of the ways that I volunteer and give back. I also belong to a 12-step fellowship that goes around speaking to other commitments, to other groups and stuff, and that's another way that I give back. I'm
doing what I do with this now. I have face-to-face conversations with the guys, local guys from the area, who will, come to my house, will sit down where I am now, and will record these conversations, and with their blessing, they go on YouTube. The jail is a step. There's a jail probably 30 minutes up the road, so there's the possibility that I could be going into there to speak with willing prisoners. That is a goal of mine for next year. I wouldn't say a goal, that's probably the wrong word, but something that is a possibility. And that probably leads me on. Go on.
Another, like, the homeless is another avenue too, and I don't mean like just rolling up on them with the camera rolling and trying to get their story. But going out there and making a human connection with people that live on the street and asking them to share their story if they're interested in doing that, the gems that you will find.
Yeah.
So that's always an option too, but they have to be willing and consenting to the conversation.
And that's it, because I've had this conversation with a friend of mine. He said the same thing, go and try and speak to some of the homeless people. But for me, it's a difficult, I mean, how would I start that conversation? To me, it could come, unless you were really careful about the way that I approached it, that could come across in a very difficult, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like,
ask them their name.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, what's your name? Try that. See them. Instead of like doubting how they're going to receive it. Don't worry about how they're going to receive it. Just ask them their name. Sit next to them. Ask them permission. Do you mind if I sit next to you? Sit down. What's on your mind? Oh, what's going on? Are you hungry? Or anything like that. I mean, you don't have to start off with anything like that. But if you just treat them like a human being, like they are human beings, and you'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know if you notice this, even just with civilized people that are out there working, at the register or whatever. Like I strike up conversations with people everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I try to talk to people.
Me too.
They know me when I get there. They're happy to see me. I'm happy to see them because there's a genuine human connection there every time. But as far as like, you'll know because you're you have some level of awareness about you. You'll know which people to engage with and which people not to, and you'd be surprised with just a compassionate eyeball, like just a genuine curiosity, I had all of those doubts about working with the guys in the jail too, man. And guys who are in jail are intense. They're in crisis, man. Those guys are fucking intense. It's cool because I had both perspectives. So when I was in that class in the jail, what I noticed is that it was something I look forward to every week. I would go to that class and that hour would go by like this. I wasn't even in jail when I was in that class. I was elsewhere. I was so absorbed. So when I full circle came back to work there as a songwriting instructor, it was the exact opposite. So I dreaded going there all week. And then when I got there, time was really slow and it was backwards. And I thought to myself, what the fuck is that? Like, what is that all about? And the conclusion is like, holy shit, it's because they're looking forward to that time with me all week. And so they're giving off an intense energy the same way that I was when I was in there in the class. And so in a way, my ego doesn't want to do that. I don't want to deal with intense energy, right? And when I realized that that's what that was what was happening, I was like, I was able to fix it. I was able to fix it, and I started looking forward to going there and giving them my time and attention, which is what I say on TikTok all the time, right? That your time and attention is the most valuable thing that you can give to anybody. So it's like a light. It's like you are literally shining your beam of consciousness on another human being. And if they're the type of human being that doesn't usually get that, the reward is beyond anything that you can comprehend, right?
I mean, it's hit me hard. And I'm not saying I'm not somebody who doesn't see anybody as a human. I guess the reason that sort of made me a little bit emotional then from what you said is because obviously you've been in that environment. And for something so simple to be so difficult for the majority of the working population on a day-to-day basis, what does that show us as a society to just have the inability to see somebody as a human being? It's fucking sad, man.
We shifted away from human connection and commune into this capitalist 80-hour, 50-hour, 40-hour work week.
Yeah, I agree.
Our time is limited. We have goals and places to go, and so we built devices to get us there faster. And so anybody who's in our way is a nuisance. Any object, humans became objects, cogs in the wheel. They're not, so to like reel it in and to start being human again and actually make connections it's like such a fundamental thing, but it's missing from our society.
Yeah, man, I didn't realize how much until what you've just said there, and then I just thinking about that while you were speaking, and fucking, that's probably the biggest thing that I'll take away from this conversation. I
was scrolling TikTok one day and I stopped on this TED Talk with a 7-year-old little girl. The first sentence that came out of her mouth, I burst into tears. It wasn't even that it was a profound sentence. It was that I knew this person was about to deliver me a message that I was never going to forget. And so I watched it and it just blew up into emotions. And I was kicking myself in the ass because I thought I should have duetted the first time I watched it. And so I started a TikTok recording and I duetted the second time I watched it. And the second time, the same thing happened. Please go watch that. It's on my TikTok. After this conversation, go watch it. It's like a 7-minute TED Talk from this little girl who talks about changing the world by playing peekaboo. You can change the world just by playing peekaboo with your children. And she demonstrates how the human brain develops in infancy and how important it is for the child to have a direct connection. And you know this, you're a father. All your children want from you is the best possible relationship they can ever have. That's all they ever want. That's a good
And
deal.
I understand that because, and the same as you know, but didn't have the best relationship with my mum. My father wasn't around, and all you want as a child from your parents is some time. You know, that's it.
Good
And
job.
yeah,
You did a good job. I'm proud of you. You know, anything like that. I had a moment. So they voted me captain of the football team at the end of my junior year. I was a 2-time felon at that point. I had been to jail twice. I was a womanizing, cocaine snorting, rootin' tootin' criminal.
Mm.
The kid that was up for my position became a cop. He's still a cop. And it's ironic that we were neck and neck. I couldn't shake this kid no matter how hard I pushed myself, Lee. He was right next to me. No matter how hard so at the end of the day, they picked him to start my junior year, and I got benched. I was devastated because I had told everybody the year before when we went undefeated and won the Super Bowl that I was going to be captain of the football team, and then I got benched. They picked him because he was a model student. I was a criminal. Fair enough.
Renegade. You're a renegade.
So I went 3 games taking everything I had out on the other players on the field, like unloading on them. And I was a force. I was small, but I was explosive. And the 3rd game came, and the coach came up to me and he said, "Cormier, strap it up. You're going in." I'm like, "Fucking A, dude, finally." So I strap it up, and he's like, "Go get me Charlie Waters." I'm like, "The D tackle?" I was an outside linebacker.
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Coach, I've never played D tackle in my life." He's like, can you listen? He grabbed me by the face mask. "Can you go in there, put your fingers in the mud? Are you afraid to get dirty?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Then go put your fingers in the mud when that ball wiggles." He said, "Get me the quarterback. Can you do that?" I said, "Yes." He smacked me upside the helmet and said, "Then go get the quarterback." So they sent me in. It's second and 10. I don't know where exactly we were, but they were probably on their 40-yard line. And I come up to this this offensive line. They're huge. These kids are all huge. And they're looking at me, whistling at me like, bro, I had pencil legs, you know? And I put my fingers down in the mud. It's raining. The quarterback does his thing. The ball moves. The second that ball wiggled, I was in the backfield. Like that. I'm chasing down the quarterback. He rolls out, and I'm chasing him down, and I dove, and I got that kid for like a 16-yard loss. The very first time I ever played defensive tackle. And the whole sideline erupted into like a chant of Rudy. They all started calling me Rudy. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, Rudy. Classic.
No.
So it's when an underdog gets like the starting position, like the smaller kid on the team. So that's basically what happened. I get through that season. We were predicted to go 3-8 because our whole team graduated. The undefeated team the year before graduated. We were supposed to suck. We went 8-3 that season. I made the paper for being the smallest defensive tackle in the state that had the record for the most sacks at that time. It was 16 sacks in a season. And I didn't even have the full season because I had 3 games on the bench. So they voted me captain of the football team. Long story long. And they put the first 3 captains on the stage, and each time the coach would talk about the person in a vague way so that the crowd had to guess who it was, whatever. So when it came down to it, everybody knew it was between me and this kid who ended up becoming a cop. And we had the same classes. We had a lot of the same things. So the coach, when he was giving the attributes of the player, the whole crowd's like on the edge of their seat, like waiting to hear like who it is. And then when he says, "But this kid's, 165 pounds and the smallest," so he said something like that, the smallest guy for this position. The way that this whole audience like erupted into like triumph, like my head fell in my hands. I started bawling my eyes out. I went up to the stage to accept the position, and each guy had a chance to speak. And when it was my turn, the first 3 guys were speaking, and I was looking around the audience for my parents.
Oh, what?
And I'm like, "Where are they?" And they weren't there. And, I had that apple in my throat, like it was the one thing the whole town was proud of me, like the way that, they weren't even there for that. So when it was my turn, I started speaking, and then the back door opens to the room, and you hear like this commotion, and then everybody turns in their seat and looks to the back of the room, and then my parents walk in, my father and my stepmother. They looked like, who's the character from the Peanuts that has like the little bugs around them all the time? Pigpen.
I don't know.
They look like Pigpen. You know, like
Okay.
they walked in the room just looking disheveled and under the influence. Like everybody's like suit and tie at this event, right? And my parents come in. The wave of embarrassment that I felt at that moment. The only reason I told you that whole story was because I didn't get that validation. I didn't get that. At least I didn't get it. Like you said about your mother, they did what they could with what they had, and they weren't equipped with much. I had that resentment for a long time, and I carried that with me for a long time. So I get it. Lacking validation is tough.
Yeah. I appreciate you telling me that story, mate. Resonates though a lot of when you said like you feel like you know me. A lot of what you've said has resonated with me because of similar stories that I've got, you know. But I wanted this to be a lot more about you and your story rather than me comparing my story with your story, if you get me. Well, I guess we're gonna call it a day, you know. I think we've had 2 hours.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again sometime and see what comes out of it. I mean, this was just the first time, but I'm glad that you're doing this.
And I've said to everybody, you know, this journey isn't just about me. It's about the people who come on there. They're the ones explaining their life and what they're doing. So, you know, we'll definitely do it again. Definitely do it again for sure.
Well, Lee, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for your time and attention. That's what I always tell the people that are listening on TikTok. And I really, truly appreciate it. Anytime someone's interested to hear a little bit more about where it came from or how I got to this mindset, if that can make any bit of an impact on anybody at all, even if it's just a little bit, I feel a lot better about that day. Did you ever hear the starfish story?
No.
So there's a little boy and his father on the beach, and the tide's going out, and the little boy says to the father, "Look at all the starfish, Dad. They got to go back in the water or they're gonna die." And so he lets go of his hand and he runs over and he picks up the starfish and he starts throwing them in the water. And I mean, they're all over the beach. And so he picks up another one and he throws it in and he's going down the beach and he's throwing them in. And then these teenagers are walking the other way and they stop and they start making fun of the kid and they're laughing at him. And they says, "What are you wasting your time for, man? Like, you're not going to be able to save them all. What's the point?" And the little kid looked at him and he smiled and he says, he picked up that starfish right there and he flipped it into the water and he turned back at them and he said it mattered to that starfish, and then he just went about his business. So
I get it
every time you make a connection with somebody, it matters to them, man, especially if there's someone who came from a life like the life we had. So I commend you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it, brother.
We'll be in touch.
Until next time. 100%.
All right, Lee.
Cheers, mate.
Appreciate it. Hey, go back to that live.
I will. I'll let you know. I'll either be in jail or I'll be fine.
You got this, bro.
Yeah.
Just remind yourself it's only a conversation. That's all.
Yeah, I'm going to do it, you know. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see. You don't
have to accept the invitation. An invitation is, that's your choice, you know. So if she sends you an invitation, you have to accept it.
I think, like you said, you know, nothing bad's going to happen. So I think if I come across it, I'll do it. I'll accept it. Just see.
Or even if you don't accept it, you could just tell them in the chat, "I'm here to listen." That might surprise the fuck out of her. You never know. But we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
That's it, mate. I'll let you know. All right,
Lee. Thank you again.
Right. Cheers, mate. See you now.
Later.